good to be together. So I have just a few thoughts that I'd like to share quickly, and I'd like to make this very practical, so the youngest of us and the oldest of us can um, be edified by this. So maybe just starting with a question for the children. Sometimes you might hear the term about taking up someone's cross, okay? Or somebody will say that I have a heavy cross to bear. Okay, you ever hear something like that? Like, this is my cross. What does that mean? Anybody? Is it just words, or what does that mean when somebody says that? Maybe somebody might say, "Oh, the biggest cross of my life is when my child died," or maybe heard people say that my singlehood is my cross. Okay, um, what does that mean? Okay, any anybody, including the adults? Okay, so Darwin said it's a surrender of the will. All right, very good. I think that's a good answer. So I'd like to think about this a little bit more. So it's understandable that people use this phrase because Jesus used this phrase, and he said that if anyone wants to come after me, if anyone wants to like be my disciple, he should deny himself. That's like surrender the will, and take up his cross and follow me. So I gave some examples of the cross, like maybe the biggest cross was when my child died, or the biggest like a cross is my singlehood. I gave those examples. Some people talk about their sickness. I have diabetes. That's my cross. So I'd like to think about that. Are those good examples? Is that good usage of that word? So we're going to come back to that in just a little bit, but I'm going to take a detour on a different subject, then we'll come back to this. So I think we all know what it's like to be tempted, and I'd like to think about where do temptations come from. So I think most times the way that temptations come to us is through our flesh, and oftentimes people use the word flesh, and um, and that sometimes needs to be understood as well. So, children, what does it mean, your flesh? Somebody say something. Okay, so I hope that if we don't know, that's okay. I hope that we can learn this so that when we hear this word, we know what we're talking about. Okay, because it's not good if we sit in church and we hear good people share good sermons, and after it's all done, we go home and we have no idea what it was about. Right? So, what does it mean, the flesh? Okay, it's very simple. Okay, our flesh is our body. Almost always, a few exceptions. Almost always, when the Bible talks about the flesh, it means our bodies. Okay? How many can remember that? Okay. Brett, what does it mean in the Bible when it talks about the flesh? Our bodies. That's right. Okay? So our flesh is our bodies. So temptations come to us through our flesh, through our bodies. So our bodies have desires. Our bodies want things. We want comfort. We want pleasure. We want to, sometimes we want to feel pride. And James talks about this in the Bible. He says, where do wars and fights come from? Don't they come from your desires for pleasure, from your body? So it's the war in your members. So James talks about murder and lust and covetousness and wars. He says all these things are coming from within. from our bodies. Our bodies are what make us want to do wrong. Okay? Sometimes you might have this picture that when you're tempted, it's because like Satan whispered in your ear or something, right? But that's not how it works. We covet because of our bodily desires. And so because of that, the bad things that want to come out of our lives are coming from our bodies. That means we need to be um, we're like in a battle against our bodies, against the desires of our bodies. Paul says, he says, I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest that when I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. So he's like, I spend my time, I spend my energy to um, to choose differently than what my body wants me to do, right? Okay, so let's talk again about taking up the cross. Okay, so taking up the cross is something that's distinctly for Christians. Okay, the world doesn't take up the cross. Okay, the world they might have difficulties, they might have challenges, they might have sickness, they might have death, but for them it's not taking up the cross, because taking up the cross is something that Jesus is calling his disciples to. So taking up the cross is when we choose to take God's way over our own way. Okay? Sometimes you want to do something that's wrong. We know what God says that we should do that's right. When we make that choice, I'm going to do what God says instead of what I want. That is taking up our cross. That is surrendering our will. It's kind of like an intersection. We come to, in the road, we come this way, but then there's a sign that says you need to go a different way. It's like the way that we want to go with our lives, with our bodies. God says there's a different way for you to go. When you choose His way, that's taking up your cross, is surrendering your will. If you're tempted to be angry or to hit somebody, hit your brother or sister or something like that, and then you say, I'm not supposed to do that. Even though I want to, I'm not going to. Okay? That's a good thing. That's surrendering your will. So I'm going to give some examples, and you tell me if this is an example of taking up your cross or not. Okay? So, what about persecution for righteousness' sake? Would that be taking up your cross? If you think it is, raise your hand. Okay? If you don't think it is, raise your hand. Okay? A lot of people don't raise their hand at all. Okay, so if you're persecuted for righteousness' sake, that's surrendering your will. That's choosing God's way over your own way, choosing to be persecuted rather than disobey God. Does that make sense? So, persecution for righteousness' sake is taking up your cross. What about sickness? Oh, wow! Somebody we know is on their deathbed, or even um, maybe you get sick and you're in bed for a week. Sick, is that taking up your cross? Who thinks it is? Okay. Um, how would we decide if that's taking up your cross or not? Okay. So taking up your cross is something you choose to do. Okay. You don't choose to get sick, right? You don't choose. And also, taking up your cross is something that is for Jesus and His followers, right? So the world gets sick too. They're not taking up their cross. Okay. When you get sick because of other reasons. It's not because um, you're a disciple of Jesus, and to be a disciple of Jesus means you're sick. That's not how it works. So sickness is not taking up your cross. Here's another example. The Bible talks about some people who became who were in poverty because of helping the poor. They gave so much away that they made themselves poor. Is that taking up your cross? What do you think, children? If you make yourself poor by giving away to the poor, is that taking up your cross? I think so. You're doing it for the sake of um, you know, because we know that the Lord wants us to help the poor, and we choose to do that. We'd rather be rich ourselves, but if we give it away to the poor and make ourselves poor, that's a good thing. So I gave the example earlier about singlehood. Um, so maybe not this one for the children. Is singlehood something that is a cross? Anybody? Okay. Somebody's shaking their head no, and I agree. It's not. It's not taking up your cross, and the reason is because anybody could be single, right? You don't need to be a Christian to be single, and it's not something usually, but it could be, because because of the call of God on someone's life. However, I suppose there could be a case where God would have a call on somebody's life to be single, and they so choose to be because of um, they understand that to be God's will for them. And I suppose in that case, that could be a cross. What about if somebody has a job and they lose their job because they choose to do what's right? You remember Daryl? He was a teacher, and that kind of happened to him, or something pretty similar. Is that is that taking up your cross? What do you think? If somebody has a job and they give up their job or they get fired or something because of their commitment to follow Jesus, is that taking up their cross? Yeah, it is. That's a good thing. So as Christians, we should be. It should not be difficult to think of ways in which we are denying ourselves to follow Jesus. If we can't think of any ways where our desires and the desires of God cross, there might be a problem because the way of Jesus is not the way of pleasing ourselves. Okay, so it's expected that there would be ways in which we need to defer to God. Okay, if there's somebody I was talking to a while ago now, who claimed to be a Christian, and I asked him in what ways his life is different because he is a Christian. What are you doing differently? How is your life different because of that? And he couldn't think of any way at all that his life was different by being a Christian. And I think that's a problem because if we're taking up the cross, like Jesus said in Matthew 16:24, it's something that he says, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up the cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever saves his life for my sake will find it. If that's not our experience, then we should be thinking pretty seriously what is wrong. So Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he talked about a cross that he had, and I'm just going to read what he wrote here. He says, lest I should be exalted above measure, lest I become proud or get too great in some earthly way, or I'm not sure. By the abundance of revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly rather boast in my infirmities, like in this thorn that he has, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, and in distress for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So you'll notice that he's not only denying himself and accepting these things, but he's happy to be able to deny himself. He's happy to be able to, um, he's rejoicing in infirmities. Okay, he's rejoicing in reproaches and in needs and in persecutions and in distress because he says, the power of Christ may rest on me. He says, when I'm weak, then I'm strong. So I think it's interesting that very closely tied to these troubles that he's experiencing, he's also seeing a reward. And it's a reward that I think is pretty important to him. So scripture says elsewhere, this analogy of the seed, it says, except a seed falls into the ground and dies, then there's not going to be any life. Okay? If we're not like dying to ourselves, if we're not taking up our cross, then there's not going to be any life coming out of that. We won't have the power of Christ. So there's one little parable that's only one verse long, and it is this. Jesus said this: the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys the field. Okay? So what happens? Well, this man, he's a farmer. He has a field. Somewhere there is a field. It's not his. And he finds that there's something in that field. There's a treasure in this field. It's a really valuable treasure. So what did he sell to be able to buy that? What did he need to get rid of so that he can buy that? Yes, everything. That means he emptied his piggy bank and he emptied his whole bank account. He sold his car or his horse and buggy or whatever he had. He sold his house. He got rid of everything that he had so that he could get this. And you know what? After he got it, what do you think his reaction was? What's his reaction? Wow, that was expensive. Like, I kind of think I overpaid on that. You think that's his reaction? No. He's like, that was a bargain. Giving up everything for this treasure I found is cheap. Like, I get the good end of the deal. That's too good to be true. Like, this is amazing. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul is writing about giving, and he says that God loves a cheerful giver. He says we shouldn't give grudgingly. We should give. We shouldn't give out of necessity, but God loves a cheerful giver. And I think as John D. Martin has observed, and I confirm this, that the word cheerful giver, the word cheerful in the Greek comes from the word hilaros, and the word hilaros means hilarious. He's really happy to give. Okay? So he's not giving because I need to give to the poor, or I need to give to every week I gotta give, $20 away. No, he's like so happy to give. And why is he happy to give? It's because of what Matthew 16:25 says. That's the verse we started with here about taking up the cross. It's because that whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life, whoever gives up everything for that, he's going to find it. He's going to save his life by giving, by taking up the cross, by not saving his life. He's going to find it. He's going to be gaining. And then Jesus says, "What profit is it if a man gains the whole world?" Suppose you don't do that, what we were describing here, and instead you gain the whole world and you accumulate, and then you lose your own soul. He says, "What will a man give in exchange for his soul?" For the Son of Man will come in glory of his Father with his angels and will reward each according to his works. That means that those that are giving away for the sake of the gospel, God sees that, and God's going to reward them abundantly. So, in review, children, what does it mean to take up the cross? Yes. Okay, give up everything for God. Okay, that's taking up the cross. Exactly. Great answer. Second question. What does the Bible mean when it talks about the flesh? Yes. That's right. Okay, very good. All right, may the Lord bless all of you. Actually, I want to sing a song. Number 540. I love this song. I think the words are amazing. Um, sometimes people talk about the tune of a song and the words should go together, and I think that's true. And I think this is a song that needs a new tune. I think this is a song that needs to be more jubilant, more happy. It's talking about giving up the cross. Listen to the words here. Verse 1. Jesus, I my cross have taken, all to leave and follow thee. Destitute, despised, forsaken, thou from hence, like from here forward, my all shall be. Perish every fond ambition, all I've sought or hoped or known. Yet how rich is my condition. God and heaven are still my own. That should be sung with jubilation. Let's sing, starting in verse 2. You can stand.